Most of what we are told about human sexuality during our first 20 years is based on a misunderstanding of how our bodies actually work. A lot of us were raised with the desire imperative, the expectation that we are obligated to feel spontaneous, lightning bolt desire for our partners at all times. This creates a constant pressure to keep the spark alive, forcing people into a stressful loop of trying to conjure up a feeling that refuses to appear on command. When that spontaneous kaboom of desire fails to happen, people often look at their relationships or themselves and conclude that something is deeply broken. But experiencing a sudden urge for intimacy out of nowhere is just one way to experience arousal. It is not the default setting for every human being. There is a second, equally healthy path called responsive desire. For many people, desire doesn't appear out of thin air. It emerges in response to experiencing pleasure first. Realizing that you operate on responsive desire can immediately remove the feeling that you are broken or that your relationship is failing. Historically, sex therapy was built on physical mechanics alone. The early science focused on what the body was doing, while largely ignoring the mind. In the 1960s, researchers Masters and Johnson established a 4-phase model: arousal, plateau, orgasm, and a refractory period. But desire, the actual wanting, was nowhere to be found in their sequence. In the 1970s, Helen Singer Kaplan realized that you cannot treat human sexuality without factoring in the psychological component of when and how much people actually want sex. Researchers at the Kinsey Institute later demonstrated that sexual response is a neurological process, showing that the brain's role is just as significant as the genitals. They developed the dual control model, which maps two distinct pathways in the brain that manage our sexual response: the excitation system and the inhibitory system. Physical mechanics are effectively useless if the brain's software isn't engaged. At the biological level, you simply cannot have sex without a brain. The accelerator constantly scans your environment for sex-related sensory information, what you see, smell, or think about, and sends the signal to turn on. Simultaneously, your brakes scan for reasons not to be turned on, like stress, body image concerns, or relationship arguments. When people struggle with intimacy, it is almost never because they lack stimulation to the accelerator. It is usually because there is too much pressure on the brakes. Whether a physical sensation feels good or bad depends entirely on context, the combination of your external environment and your internal emotional state. Consider tickling. If you are feeling playful and safe, it can be fun. But if you are in the middle of a fight, that exact same physical sensation becomes incredibly irritating. Arousal is a dual process. It requires actively co-creating a context that turns on the ons while simultaneously turning off the offs. Couples who maintain a connection over the long term don't wait for spontaneous sparks. They learn how to intentionally build a context where both of their brains feel safe enough to access pleasure. Instead of expecting a lightning strike, the goal is to maintain smoldering embers, banked and ready to be stoked when the time is right. Building this context requires talking to your partner about your individual accelerators and brakes, even if having sex feels easier than talking about it. You can frame this as a shared exploration to deepen your connection, rather than a critical session about what isn't working. When you remove the pressure of frequency and performance, a clear standard for well-being remains. Pleasure is the measure. Specific positions, the number of orgasms, or how often you have sex are secondary. If everyone involved is consenting, enjoying themselves, and glad to be there, you are already doing it right. By abandoning the myth of the spark and centering mutual pleasure and context, the stress of desire falls away, leaving room for a healthy, sustainable connection. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing to Deep Dive Daily, hitting that like button, and dropping a comment below.